Welcome to our video, GitHub or Azure DevOps, Decisions. A tale about how a development team and an operations team have to decide whether to use GitHub or Azure DevOps.
So in this video, we'll be discussing how you can use Azure DevOps and or GitHub in this instance. As part of this, we'll cover both the cloud and on-premises version of both, as well as interesting alternatives. We will cover the features of Azure DevOps and GitHub both have, including the source control, the boards, the CI/CD pipelines, and the wikis. And at the end of this session, you will have a basic understanding of how the options they have compare to each other, as well as you can do with what you can do with both systems.
To give this video some context, one of us is from the SQL development team that uses GitHub, and the other is from the SQL operations team that uses Azure DevOps. Our manager has decided that both teams will merge into one DevOps team. So, we are trying to decide which one the entire team will use.
In reality, this should be a lengthy discussion along with testing of both products. However, since this is only a short video, we've taken it upon ourselves to speed up this process. In addition, our manager has decided that the development team lead will become the Scrum Master and the operations team lead will be the product owner.
Now, for those of you who don't know, a product owner is responsible for translating business needs into workable backlog items for Scrum sprints, which means they must speak to stakeholders at various levels within the business. In addition, they are ultimately responsible for prioritizing those work items, even though they may get input about those priorities from various stakeholders.
And the Scrum Master's role is to empower the team to do those backlog items by encouraging how they work and removing any impediments when they appear.
Sander, before we go any further, let's introduce ourselves.
Yes. So I'm Sander. I'm a SQL Server DBA. I'm from the Netherlands. I work for Waypoint Analytical, which is a company based in the United States who do large-scale water, soil, and plant sampling. I'm a Cloud and Data Center MVP, and I'm a major contributor to the DBA Tools project. You can follow me on Twitter. I have a blog, and if you have any questions after this session, feel free to send me an email. All the demos you'll see today will be available on my GitHub page under the presentations repository. Find this session, and then you'll have all the scripts out there. And now Kevin is going to do his bio, which is slightly more complicated than mine.
Well, thanks for that, Sander. And on that note, my name's Kevin Chant. I'm a senior database architect living in the Netherlands. However, as some of you can probably tell from the accent, I'm originally from the southwest of the UK. However, I live in the Netherlands due to the fact my wife is Dutch. So basically, I'm an Englishman, living in the Netherlands, working for a French-based company because he met a woman in Australia. Now, whenever I say this out loud, I realise why Sander thinks this is complicated. Now, I have 24 years experience working in IT, and over that time I've worked in various sectors, including the banking, oil, and health insurance industries. Now, I've worked with all versions of SQL Server in one form or another, and I have various certifications, including both the new and the old style MCSE, and more recently, I became a Microsoft Certified DevOps Engineer expert, which is fairly relevant for this video. And as you can see on my bio, I've also recently become a Microsoft Certified Trainer and a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. And just like Sander, you can find me online in various places like Twitter, LinkedIn, and my own blog, etc. Anyway, the first thing to discuss is whether or not to use an on-premises solution. For example, Azure DevOps Server or GitHub Enterprise. For those who aren't aware, Azure DevOps Server is the new name for TFS, which is the application that you install on premises to do your application lifecycle management. However, it's now been rebranded to look and feel just like the Azure DevOps Cloud Services, which of course we should use instead. Whoops, sorry, Sander. I meant could. Freudian slip there.
I'll take your word for it. Anyway, as far as GitHub is concerned, we can install GitHub Enterprise, which is GitHub's recommendation if you have a team over 12 members. And us developers are currently using GitHub Teams because we have less than 12 now. However, once we are going to merge our teams, we will hit that number pretty fast. So we can, of course, use GitHub Enterprise in the cloud as well.
Personally, I like to use an on-premises solution so that we can handle its security better on premises. Plus, it means we get to keep the data stores locally, so we can do some analytics on them. For example, we can create the SQL Server databases that we install on premises as part of Azure DevOps Server. However, the downside is we probably have to deploy multiple servers with applications on for business continuity purposes. In addition, Sander, we'd have to maintain and patch those servers.
Yeah, but of course, then there's the option of installing either of them as virtual machines with a cloud provider. However, I propose we keep it simple and use a cloud provider service instead. And that way we won't have to patch and maintain everything. Because all of that is being maintained for us in the background for us as we use a cloud-based service.
Well, that's true. And we can still secure them both in the cloud anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, whichever we use, we must still consider security and compliance to keep any auditors happy. Luckily, both are well structured and easy to manage.
So the main point we want you to take away from this section is if you install the server yourself, you have to patch and maintain everything. Whereas the cloud-based service, it's all done behind the scenes for you.
Right, so as you can see here, Azure DevOps has its own hierarchy. At the top, you have your own service, where your account has access to one or more organizations, which you can see on the left-hand side here in Azure DevOps. Now, these organizations can be the company you work for, or if you work for a large enterprise, just a division of that enterprise business, or it could be like, as you can see here, an organization that you've created for your own personal testing purposes. Now, if you have the right permissions, you can change some various settings at the organization level. So, for example, you can change the name of your organization, you can view the existing projects you have in place, you can do some auditing, you can view which extensions you have installed. You can set permissions at a global level if you want to. Quite a significant one here, which you might want to remember a bit later on in this video, is that you can change what is called a process for all of your different projects. Another useful organizational setting that you can see here is that you can actually change the default name for your new repositories. Because as a lot of you watching this are probably aware of at this moment in time, there's a bit of controversy surrounding the origins of the naming of the master branch in Git. Therefore, both Microsoft in Azure DevOps and GitHub allow you to change the default name of your main branch from now on. And in fact, Git for Windows, the application itself, allows you to set this now as well. And then there's various other settings you can change at the organizational level as well. So if we go back to the organization, you can see that each organization can actually have one or more projects, which can have one or more teams, which we'll discuss in a minute. So, for example, if I click on one of the projects here, you can see there's various services available on the left-hand side. And again, if you have the right permissions, you can change some things at the project level as well. Again, you can change the name of your project. You can have a nice logo to it, like we've done here. You can manage your teams. and you can actually fine tune the permissions for all of those teams as well. And you can also fine tune permissions for logical groups that you want to create as part of those teams. So you can change some settings as well to do with the boards, as well as settings for the pipelines. As you can see here, some very interesting ones. You can view all the repositories inside your project. And again, if you don't have the permissions to change your main branch at an organizational level, you can actually do it at the project level instead. And if I scroll a bit further down, you can see how much storage your artifacts are using. And finally, you have some interesting settings to do with your tests as well.
Well, that's all very well, but you can change settings in GitHub Organizations as well. So let me demonstrate that to you.
You're going to take the screen, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Sorry, wrong screen.
I feel like we should be playing some interlude music whilst we wait.
So this is the correct screen. So this is my GitHub page, and let's go into our organization. So if I go on the right side, I can go to my organizations, and I can create a new organization if I want to. We're going to go into our in our organization. Let's go to the settings. And here we have some general settings that we can do for our profile. We have our billings and plans, so we can change which payment plan we have. So you can choose Teams or Enterprise if you need to. We can change the member privileges, so we can probably say people can create public or private repositories. You can change this right here. Do you allow forking, and do you allow the deletions of issues, all those kind of things. We have organizational security, which enables you to have MFA, multi-factor authentication, which is really important nowadays. You can also use SSH certificates to do all the authorization if you want to, and even allow certain IPs only to submit to this organization. Security analysis, so we can do all kinds of things with the dependencies for the alerts. We can verify our domains to make it even more secure. The audit logs, so what happened all after in this organization. Webhooks, which is really useful if you want to hook this into some third-party application. Third-party access, so you can restrict what the third parties can actually see. Install other GitHub applications if you want to. Schedule reminders, which is even able to do things with Slack, as you can see. Repository topics, so what's the topic of this repository, which would give you a clear understanding what this is actually doing. Repository defaults, which Kevin also showed with the main branch name. So we can change this to main on the organizational level. You can also use labels, which later on in the session you'll see, which is going to be a tag within Azure DevOps. Deleted repositories, maybe something got deleted. You can see what happened there. Projects, so we can use with projects like we do with Azure DevOps. We can create a project and do manage all our issues in there. We can handle our teams. So what can we do with the teams? Actions. So do we allow actions to happen, which you will see later on in the session. We'll do things with workflows and Azure pipelines. packages, which is what our artifacts are within GitHub. Our secrets, which are really important. You can use that to save your passwords without even having to use the passwords at all. Developer settings. And moderation. We can even moderate and block a user. So you can block the entire user out.
Wow, that's actually very useful as well.
Yeah.
Of course, if we dive even deeper into the settings, both in Azure DevOps or GitHub, we can probably configure even more. And there's even more things which are pretty much the same between Azure DevOps and GitHub.
Yeah, and GitHub gives you a brief overview of your history when you go back into your organization. So does Azure DevOps have that, Kevin?
No. But then again, I can link into my Azure Active Directory nice and easily as well. Instead, I should say. So
the main thing we want everybody to take away is that both Azure DevOps and GitHub have settings that can be fine-tuned to your organizational needs.
Yeah.
So, anyway, now we've got the main admin stuff covered. Let's cover version control within both options.
Okay. Well, let me take the screen again in a minute. So we're covering version control. So I'm guessing you mean something like source safe.
No, not really. Something maybe a little bit more modern. So the clue is that we use Git. It's in the GitHub's name. So we are going to use Git.
Well, I get your point there. Just remember that Azure DevOps also hosts TFVC repositories as well.
Yeah, I know, but you must admit that Git has become the de facto standard for distributed version control systems.
That's for sure, which is why Azure Repos handles it so well, as I will show you. So I might actually make this a bit bigger for the audience at home who are watching this on the video. So this is basically in Azure Repos a visual representation of your Git repository that's hosted in Azure DevOps. As you can see, all the code is there. You can view your README markdown file underneath as well. You can view the commit history visually and your pushes, any branches you have, any tags you may have for anything significant. And for this video, the festive tech calendar is obviously significant. And then, of course, we can also view any pull requests as well, which we will cover shortly.
Okay, well, let me show you how that looks in GitHub.
Okay.
So let me take the screen again from you. So this is our repository. So as Kevin mentioned, we have all our folders in here. We've got our README. We've got all the options we have. We've got the issues. We've got all the branches that we can see. We can see, if we go back to the code, all the tags that we can use. So we can assign anything to a tag. And of course, there are the issues and the pull requests that we can use. So with a name like GitHub, it was kind of a giveaway. It would handle repos just as good. And so back to you, Kevin. Besides, GitHub is well established as a Git repository. Everybody knows that.
Strange, I'm getting a feeling of deja vu now you've said that. As if we've mentioned this fact before to answer a very common question we get asked.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not go there at this moment in time. What about branching strategies then? Because we could use Microsoft's release flow for Azure repos.
Well, we could use the Git flow or the GitHub flow.
Well, what's the main difference between those two? Because they sound pretty similar to me.
Yeah, they are. The main difference is that with the Git flow, you don't directly merge into the main branch unless it's a hotfix. So there's always a development or some kind of dev branch between it. With the GitHub workflow, there's not a development branch. There are only feature branches and the main branch, and each feature gets merged into the main branch after it's successfully tested and then on its way. Again, the clue is in the name and which service it created it.
Okay, so what is going to stop somebody coding their own release and pushing it straight to the main branch? I mean, can GitHub prevent that?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So in Azure DevOps, we can use branching policies. So one of which is that two people have to approve updates to the main branch. So it does this by making you create what's called a pull request. And I'll give you one guess as to which awesome service came up with that name.
And let me guess, GitHub by any chance? Well, that sounds good. Anyway, we need to use these branch policies. I mean, even though GitHub came up with the name pull requests, you can actually do them in Azure DevOps as well. As we saw just now, there's a pull request section. But on that note, I suppose I'll have a look and see if I can show you how we can make a repository in Azure DevOps SOX compliant. So I'm going to take the screen from you again, Sander.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we're back to the Azure repo service we're in just now, and click on branches. If you click on the ellipses at the end and scroll down, you can see I can select branch policies. Now, if you want to have the 4i principle in place, which is required for a lot of things like SOX, you would set the minimum number of reviewers to be at least 2. And then what you would also do is scroll down and automatically include reviewers as well. So I click on the plus sign, I can, for example, add Sander. And doing this forces pull requests to be done whenever you want to do a code change on a particular branch. Another point is our SOps folks use Microsoft applications connect to our repos in Azure DevOps as well in order to do these kind of things. So I can quickly show you now how that looks. If I go to Azure Data Studio, these are actually the same pieces. These two database projects are in the same code you just saw just now in Azure repos. So I thought I'd show that to you, Sander, that I can do this in Azure Data Studio. Back over to you.
So that might be true, but I can do exactly the same thing with GitHub repos. So let me show that. If I go to my screen, you can see the repository at this moment. And if I go to the settings, which is on the repository level, I can go to the branches and I can set branch protection rules. So what is called a branching policy within Azure DevOps is a branch protection rule within GitHub. I can add a rule and I can make it a branch name pattern. So it doesn't have to be on one particular branch name. I can do anything that has something like feature or feature star or with a wildcard in it. And I can click on the require pull requests reviews before merging, so I can add the amount of reviewers. That has to be 2. Restrict people who can dismiss pull requests. Require a review for the code owners, and include administrators, which could be a thing. Restrict people who can push to matching branches, so you don't push right into some kind of development branch if you don't want to have that happen. So I could do pretty much the same thing in GitHub to be SOX compliant as well.
Okay, and I'm guessing as well you're going to tell me that you can actually do your code in Azure Data Studio as well.
Yeah, I can do that all. Because it's all the same thing.
Well, you learn something new every day. So, on another note, we better discuss boards, since I'm going to be using them to organize our backlog items.
Okay. So, well, in GitHub, you can use various boards to manage our repositories. You can use the Kanban or Scrumban kind of way. Guessing it's the same for Azure DevOps?
Well, in Azure Boards, which is one of the services in Azure DevOps, we can actually use basic Agile, Scrum, or CMMI templates for each project that you create. And as I mentioned earlier, these templates are actually called a process. So that process section I showed you in organization settings earlier, that's why it's so important. And just like GitHub, we can customize all our boards as well. However, it does look like if we use GitHub, we're going to be a bit more limited as to what we can do with boards. So, yeah. Anyway, and for example, as well, in Azure DevOps, we can actually give tags to backlog items to do all kinds of things.
Well, in GitHub, you can do the same thing, but we call them labels instead. So, oh, and we can automate what happens with certain labels.
Nice.
Okay, so let's talk about CI/CD pipelines, which is where we're going to build and deploy our deliverables.
Well, in that case, I think I'm going to take the screen again so I can give you a bit of a history lesson about something in Azure DevOps. And I say history lesson, it didn't change that long ago, to be honest with you. So this is Azure Pipelines, which is one of the other services available in Azure DevOps. And it may be a bit confusing here because the very first feature in there is called pipelines. Now, initially, it used to actually be called build, and it used to be a GUI-based format, which you can actually still select if you click on New Pipeline and choose the classic editor. So the idea originally was you would do your build in a GUI-style format, and then afterwards you had the separate releases stage, which would deal with any artifacts that were created as part of your build. However, then Microsoft introduced YAML pipelines, or CI/CD pipelines, which some of you may know that term instead. So for example, if I click on this particular pipeline here and click on edit, you will see it's all completely YAML based. And the idea is that you can handle your build and releases all completely within this pipeline. And I'm sorry if hearing the term YAML scares some of you. However, code-based developments is where the industry is going right now, and I'm pretty certain you will see some more YAML code elsewhere very, very shortly. And don't get me wrong, GUI is still good for demos and basic introductions to certain complex features in Azure DevOps. And a lot of you will still probably want to release the release mechanism for older things that you've created in the past and some options which are still not quite available as far as the YAML pipelines are concerned. However,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, however, for production deployments.
No, please don't. Don't use the GUI.
Anyway, Azure Pipelines is good for deploying all kinds of things, including schema updates to different types of SQL Server databases. So if we go back to this example we saw just now, I just show you the visual representation of the stages. I can just quickly scroll down. And as you can see, in one pipeline, you're able to deploy all kinds of different databases, whether they're on premises or hosted in Azure.
Cool. So, well, you might be surprised to know that GitHub introduced its own CI/CD mechanism as well. It's called GitHub Actions. So if I take the screen from you again, this is where we have GitHub Actions. And instead of a pipeline, we call it a workflow. And this is our workflow that we created. But to look at the YAML code, we're going to go into our workflows. And this is our YAML file. And I'm going to screen a little bigger. And as you can see, it's purely YAML based. So nobody gets confused about what to use. No GUI, no thing. Plus, Marketplace is dynamic. None of this is having to install extensions nonsense. It's not included in that. So as you can see, it's already supporting quite a few actions, including doing SQL Server deployments. So let's look into this. When I do edit, you can see all the feature actions, and I can go through the marketplace and search for several or a particular action.
Well, I'm guessing I'm on the search for DACPack, and I'm going to see if it does really deal with SQL Server deployments.
There we are. So I just search for DACPack, and I can do an Azure SQL deploy. And if we have a build with a DACPack from any kind of artifact or package called in GitHub, we can do deployments.
Well, just for fun and games, type in Kubernetes.
Kubernetes. So there's a lot out there. We can do a lot of stuff. Great secrets, Kubernetes toolset, chaos, Kubernetes action.
Oh, I've heard a lot about chaos.
Oh, chaos theories are fun. So let's look through the YAML just a bit, how everything is hosted. And this is an example of a self-hosted image that we have. But I can probably do something else with that. So, because I'm very lazy.
You're going to bring up your pipeline creation tool, aren't you?
Yes, since you mentioned it. So I had to do this a bunch of times for several databases, and I'm lazy as hell when it comes to repetitive tasks. So what I did was I the template for an SSDT solution, which is on our database, or database objects. And with the PS module development PowerShell module, I'm able to create a template. And the module is, by the way, part of the PS framework. And I created a template for that entire directory structure. Now I only have to run like one single command if I have the template, and then I can create a project. And if I run that, the result is as follows. So this is a project that I created with that particular script. And if I open that, it's a solution. So it's going to open Visual Studio for me. Let's give it a couple seconds. It has two different projects inside, one for the data model and one for the tests. But it also includes both an Azure DevOps pipeline YAML file and a GitHub Actions file. So you can go and import these in whatever Azure DevOps or GitHub pipeline you want to put it in, and start using it to create and deploy all your changes to your database.
Wow, that seems like quite a useful tool, to be honest with you.
It is, especially if you're as lazy as I am.
Well, I've taken the screen again from you now.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go and show the next popular section we're going to talk about. So in Azure DevOps, we can use Microsoft hosted agents, even within our own network on premises, which are servers that Microsoft hosts in Azure. They do a lot of the processing and the build and release tasks, like building various artifacts and deploying them. However, it appears standard that because of our infrastructure, we would have a lot of issues internally. For example, we'd have to raise a lot of firewall requests. So maybe we're better off building our own agents internally, which can be of benefit to us as well, because it can also improve the performance of pipeline tasks.
Oh, that's true, and it's actually a good idea. So good that you can do the same thing with GitHub Actions using runners instead of agents. And in fact, you can use the very same image from Microsoft to both build the agent and the runners. Whichever we use, we might as well run the agent through the command line instead of running it as a service.
How come?
Well, everybody knows that running something through the command line gives you more detailed results.
Okay, well, as you know, I've tested this once or twice in the past. Do you want to see my initial first results on the next slide?
Yeah, go ahead. Behold.
Yeah. To be fair, in Sander's defense, if you have multiple stages like we showed earlier, it will show when each stage is completed, but that's as much detail as you actually get.
Great.
Well, in Azure DevOps, Sander, we can actually use test cases as well. I'm guessing that's not the case in GitHub.
Well, in GitHub, we're a bit limited on that front. You can manage it directly within the GUI.
Yeah, I think you can set a few things externally to run in GitHub, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you can.
So I'm guessing the same goes for artifacts as well.
Well, in GitHub, we don't call them artifacts, we call them packages. And unlike Azure DevOps, it actually supports Docker and containers.
Oh, nice. So, I mean, there's other features that I like using in Azure DevOps as well. Like we can use dashboards for certain teams in Azure DevOps and other things like that. And in addition to that as well, there's actually other things. For example, we can create a wiki in Azure DevOps to share with the whole team.
Oh, we can create a wiki in GitHub as well. It's actually quite easy. And there are other integrations and toolkits for it. And we have our own command line interface.
Well, we actually have an Azure DevOps extension for Azure CLI as well, Admittedly, it's not as well developed as the GitHub CLI. In fact, I can actually show you the example of this now. So if I run this up for you, and the demo gods are hopefully on my side, as you can see, a lot of these are actually still in preview, unlike what you get with the GitHub CLI.
Great. So, which do we choose?
Man, it's a tough call, isn't it? I mean, GitHub is very popular for repositories, but Azure DevOps is becoming more popular to do your application lifecycle management.
Well, GitHub is so popular, even Microsoft uses it for most of their repositories, like SQL Server documentation and Azure Data Studio.
Oh, man, I hate to say it, but you're right. Guess that leaves us at a bit of a standstill. I suggest we get both teams together, explain the pros and cons, and put it to the vote.
Yep. And at the end of the day, we are the ones that are going to use it. So it's only fair that they are included as well for making this decision for this time around. And since we've been told we have a choice. So unlike teams and other companies, we actually have that luxury to choose between Azure DevOps and GitHub. Anyway, that's all we've got time for today. And I hope you enjoyed this session. And back to you, Kevin.
Well, yeah, like Sander said, that's it from the pair of us. I hope you've enjoyed this video today as part of the festive tech calendar. If you have any questions about the content of this video, then obviously feel free to reach out with either of us. If you want to know more about Sander's tool, for example, please contact him and not myself. And yeah, so thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Goodbye.